What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the XFL preview show for week 2. Good news is Draftkings and FanDuel are both running same size GPPs last week, 100K to first, which is always good. So that's good to see. What we're going to cover today is we're going to cover what we saw in week 1, what the biggest trends were from week 1, what I think about the trends. Some of them I think are fake news. Like, for example, running backs are dead in the XFL. I think that's partially true. I think it has gone a little too far at this point in terms of it not being true. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about, of course, some big injury news. We have some big injury news here for week 2 that's definitely going to shake up the slates. So we'll talk about that as well. I'm just going to go ahead and start right at the top, which for me really comes down to what we learned about the XFL. What I think we learned is that the second halves are going to be pretty slow. In every game, there were less plays run in the second half than the first half. I think teams realize with that running clock, if you've got a 2-score lead, you can bleed that clock in the second half. We saw St. Louis do it. We saw New York do it to a lot of success. We saw even the DC Defenders do that to some success in the second half after they got that big lead. I don't think that trend is one that's going to go away. I think that's unless these scores are competitive and they're one-score games, I think you are going to see teams try to run that clock a little bit in the second half. We had 16 touchdowns in week 1 of the XFL, so that's pretty good. 16 touchdowns is good. 14 were of the passing or defensive variety. 2 were of the rushing variety. No running backs had a rushing touchdown in week 1. I fully expect that to change in week 2. So that's probably, I think, where I differ from most people. I think most people are ready to write off the running backs. I am not. Yeah, they definitely struggled. So I went back and watched every game, and Joe, that was one of the biggest takeaways I had. In this first game, DC minus 6.5. This opened DC minus 2. I tweeted about it when it opened. I said that number was 4 points off. I had it at minus 6. It's now 6.5. I think it could get to 7 by game time. I think New York got pretty damn lucky. Tampa Bay had the most. You have the most offensive yards from scrimmage here. Let me just log out of Twitch real quick before it pops up. Discord. So I think the biggest difference here is that I think New York's pretty overrated in terms of what they can do defensively. I think DC is going to have a lot of success throwing the football. Cardale Jones is the most expensive quarterback on this, third most expensive quarterback on the slate. I think he's contrarian. So he was pretty chalky week 1 in the main GPP on DraftKings. He was about 26% owned and really didn't get there because they were in cruise control. They had those defensive scores. I think they're going to have to score more with the offense this week against the New York team. I like them a lot. So Cardale Jones is a guy I have interest in. Presley got 12 carries to Pumphrey's 4 carries. I suspect we'll see that continue. Pumphrey got 3 targets out of the backfield, whereas Presley got 3 as well. So I like Presley as a running back this week for DC. He's priced at $7,000. I think the price is very fair for him. He put up, 8 fantasy points last week without the score. I think, again, the DC Defenders only ran, 53 plays. That's one of the fewest total play counts in the entire league. Again, that's because they had 2 defensive scores. I don't think that's going to happen this week. So, again, I think DC is probably the underrated team here and the team that I'm probably going to be most overweight compared to the field on. For DC, Rashad Ross, Eli Rogers, after being 4th on the depth chart, got 6 receptions on 6 targets. Certainly looked like a starter to me. I'm going to treat him as one moving forward. He's 9,700. I think he's worth every bit of it. Rashad Ross only got 2 catches, but they didn't really need to throw the football deep against Seattle. They were in control of that game most of the way. I expect him to rebound here, so I don't mind having high exposure to both of those guys. After that, you could go to Mekhi Dupree. He's fighting a thigh injury. He's expected to play. 4,500. There's better value options on this week than Mekhi Dupree, in my opinion, but I do like DC's offense, so I'm not going to just completely ignore them. In terms of New York, I think they'll be able to score some points in this game. I don't think that DC's just going to run away with it. We saw Seattle put up 19 points against them, and Seattle is a pretty weak team. We saw them have success going down the football. I think this is a fantastic bounce back spot for Mikael McKay. I love his price at 10-2. He's so expensive. I think people are just going to ignore him. I think they're going to go to Nelson Spruce at 10-4, Sammy Coates like that, or even chase the Austin Prohl game. I love this spot for Mikael McKay. He's going to be one of my higher owned players. I think New York's going to have to throw the football deep, and I think they're going to have success with that. Prohl got 10 targets last week. That's a ton of targets. I would really expect McKay to get into the 7 to 8 target range this week. I also do like Kobe Pearson. He had a bunch of targets as well in week 1. You could go to Joe Horn. His price is still really cheap. Where is he? He's only 3,400. He had 8 targets last week, only caught 2 of them. I would fully expect him to have a big role in this offense. Jake Powell is also free. He had 6 targets as well. Again, I do think there's going to be more targets for Pearson and McKay in this game. They really didn't have to throw the football deep against Tampa. They were in control of that game most of the way. So I do think McKay and Pearson will get targets, but Powell and Horn definitely are some of the better value receivers if you're looking based off of the week 1 box scores. And they were patterns too. I would expect Joe Horn to run again too. So I don't think it was totally fluky. I think 8 targets might have been fluky, but I do think he's going to be a 6 to 7 target guy each week. Also, New York didn't run that many plays either. Tampa had the ball forever. They only ran, 13, 16, 45 plays. So, again, I do think this is another situation where the stats on New York are a little bit subdued just due to the fact they didn't run as many plays as you would expect. Question in the chat, is it worth even to use running back at salary? I think it is. I think it's going to be pretty contrarian this week. I think everyone saw last week the running backs not score. And that's just because there weren't a ton of plays inside the 10-yard line. So I went back and watched all these games once I, have the DFS blinders off. And I went and watched the games and realized really quickly that there just weren't a lot of plays run inside the 10. And that happens across a sample size of 4 football games. I don't think that every team is going to score from the 16 every time out. So there were a couple nice plays from the 15, 16, 17 that led to touchdowns. And when teams got inside the 10, they ran the football. The lone exception was that awful Aaron Murray interception where they tried to fake him out on a play action. But a lot of the plays inside the 10 were runs. So I do think running backs aren't quite as dead as we think they are. Now, a lot of these teams ran timeshares, and that definitely is an issue. But I also think as the season moves along, too, that those timeshares are going to kind of disappear, right? They kind of want to see what they got. These teams haven't seen these guys in live hitting action. So I think that that's more of a situation of just wanting to see who the better players are. I don't think that's going to last over the 10 weeks. I do think we'll see some consolidation in the playing time as well. And I think that's even true at the wide receiver position on some of these teams. If anybody has any other questions on the New York DC game, I'll take them now. If not, I will move on to what I think is going to be one of the more interesting games of the week between Tampa and Seattle. I think this is definitely a game I think people are going to get wrong. In my opinion. I mean, again, this is just all my opinion. This is my preview. Doesn't mean it's going to be right. Doesn't mean it's going to be wrong. But I definitely want to cover it. Okay, I don't see any questions. Let's move on then. Tampa Bay at Seattle. Tampa Bay, the 2.5-point favorites. Seattle is a 2.5-point dog here, 48.5 total. So Aaron Murray didn't practice again from what I've seen so far. Let me just make sure. I was hoping that I had a later injury report than the one I had. Here, I don't see anything here. I don't think he played. So I don't see any practice here for him. Brandon Silvers didn't practice with the ankle. I would be surprised if Brandon Silvers played. If Quinn Flowers starts at 7,500, he's a really appealing option. Tampa had the ball the most of the time. Tampa, as I mentioned, had the most yards of anyone in week 1. They also ran a ton of plays. They ran 66 plays. So when we look at their stat lines, we do have to remember that they ran 66 plays. I don't expect them to run 66 plays every week. Well, I guess they might against Seattle. Seattle's bad. Despite what the 19 points they put up on DC, I think that was more on the DC defense than on their talent level. Once DC got their stuff going a little bit defensively, that Seattle couldn't do anything. I like Quentin Flowers, 7,500. If he starts, I think you really have to consider him. He's a dual threat. Those rushing yards really add up. We saw it with Jordan Ta'amu, especially on those conversions too. He definitely is a guy that is a dual threat on those conversions. So I like Flowers a bunch if he gets the start. Not sure we'll know that until right before game time, but I do like Quentin Flowers this week. Davion Smith is probably the running back I have the most interest in this week. His price is $7,500. He got 16 of the team's 24 carries to running backs. Quentin Flowers obviously got 5. Smith averaged 5 yards a carry. He was not the problem. He looked good in all of his carries. And the zone read stuff with Flowers were where some of his better runs came. I think in the red zone, they try to pound them in the red zone to get that touchdown. It didn't happen. But that's good. It actually will help keep the price down a little bit. He didn't catch a ball in week 1. I would expect that to change. Another thing I do expect to change too is that I expect more running back screen passes this week. With the offensive line rules, so in the NFL you can't have a lineman more than 1 yard down the field before the pass is thrown. In the XFL, that's 3. So it's really 5 yards before you're going to get called for a penalty. I think a coaching staff's finally going to go, screen passes and on RPOs are a much better option with this rule setting. I think we're going to see a lot more screens in week 2. So I do want to try to get a running back or two I believe in on my team, because I do think they have a higher ceiling that we go. How long have I been on? I've only been on for like 10 minutes. I covered the first game. Again, this will be available on demand on Twitch and YouTube, so don't freak out if you missed the first game analysis. It'll be available like right after the show. I'm going to upload it right afterwards. Can you play both Flowers and Smith? I think you can stack Tampa. I think Tampa is a team that's going to go under-owned this week. I do. I think that people are going to look at their week 1 point total, which was 3, and overreact to where, the team put up. Well, let me pull up the team stats here. 394 yards of net offense over 71 plays, 5.5 yards, 19 first downs. I just thought they played well. They were efficient on third down. They were 7-15. They just were awful in the red zone. They were 0 for 4 in the red zone. I just think the Vipers just kind of got... that interception was horrible by Aaron Murray in the red zone. I'm not defending it, but I do think that people are overreacting a little bit to that Aaron Murray performance in week 1. I don't think it was as bad as you thought it was on TV. I mean, they averaged 5 yards a carry running the football, over 30 run attempts. I really like the Vipers offense this week. Now, Seattle's going to have 30,000 fans in that stadium. I will say that. Now, it's a football stadium. It's designed for 60,000, but 30,000 fans can make some noise. So, the first week, these teams had 17,000. Seattle's sold over 28,000. I imagine they're going to get to 30,000 tickets. It could be loud. And, Aaron Murray didn't exactly handle the pressure of the noise well in week 1. I think Quentin Flowers will do better. I think having dual threat quarterbacks in this league is the way to go, the way the rules are structured. So I do really like this offense. Now, Dan Williams was my boy last week. He was 3,000, and I just couldn't leave the salary on the table to play more of him on the main slate. I had like 25% instead of like the 70% I should have had. Had like 70% on the Sunday slate, which was really nice. I love Dan Williams again this week. I don't think that was a fluke. Every training camp video I watched was Dan Williams scoring a touchdown, Dan Williams catching a ball. And I think that's the one thing I learned from week 1 is all those training camp videos weren't just mirages. There wasn't really any player that, other than maybe a St. Louis player that we'll talk about, that came out of nowhere that I didn't see clips of in this tape. So what I saw kind of came to fruition, and that was Dan Williams is a huge part of that offense. So I'm not going to give up on that either. I think the part that surprised me most here was Tolliver's workload. He got 8 targets and a running back carry. He's still a little cheap this week, too. Tolliver's only 3,900. That kind of workload I don't think is going to go anywhere. Truesdale's a nice tight end, but I'm not paying 6,700 for him. He's got way too many drops in his game. The good catches are nice, but he definitely doesn't. Oh, Davion Smith did have a catch. I missed it. He did have a catch for 8 yards, so not like he didn't get any targets out of the backfield. So for me, it's Quentin Flowers, it's Davion Smith, it's Dan Williams, and Tolliver. Those are probably the top 4 guys I'm looking at on Tampa. I saw a tweet that the optimal lineup last week had 30K. And the funny thing is, JT, it's not like I didn't know that, right? I knew the pricing was soft. It's just so hard when you're like, should I play Dan? You have 10K left on the table. It's like, should I play Dan Williams or Mikhail McKay? I'm like, Mikhail McKay is an awesome player. We saw it. Like, if McGloin could have thrown a better football, he would have had like an 80-yard touchdown pass. So it's just tough, right? But Dan Williams was. It's just tough too when you. Like, all you're watching is YouTube clips and, like, Twitter tweets where it's like they're throwing in the ball in the end zone. You're like, what is that? Like, you don't know. So, but now that I've seen it on the field, I'm pretty convinced. And the funny thing is, after the first day, right, I kind of saw all the same guys in practice do well in the games. I'm like, this is translating. And I should have just adjusted some Sunday ownership, but I was being stubborn. Yeah, but that's the AAF. Truesdale, the reason he's not in the NFL is drops, and you can kind of see it. It's the Sammy Coates problem. We'll talk about Sammy Coates here in a bit, but it's the Sammy Coates problem, right? Like, the same thing that's held him down his whole career held him down in this game. And he had a very costly turnover, too, at the end of the game when they were trying to make a little bit of a run at it. So, I said Truesdale, didn't I? Yeah. So, I don't like him as much, I think, as the field. The price is too high for me. There's just other players at that price point that I would rather take shots on than him. I suspect Truesdale too will get some ownership. For Seattle, Brandon Daniels is probably the better quarterback between Silvers, but the fact he couldn't win that job is concerning. I do think that the defense for New York is a little better than I think we're giving it credit for here. I'm sorry, of Tampa. They only gave up 226 yards of offense. They held New York to 1 of 10 on third down. That's pretty good. So they held them to 3 yards a yard carry. I just don't think Seattle's going to get a whole lot going against this Tampa defense. If you had to ask me right now who my front runner for defense play of the week is, it probably would be either DC or the Tampa Bay Vipers. I really think the Vipers are in a spot to do well defensively here. Silvers just made a couple very inexplicable passes. We talked about it on last week's stream, how I thought DC was like the biggest edge on the slate playing them over Dallas. That turned out to be quite true. I think the Tampa Bay... I hate playing road defenses in the NFL, but this spot feels like such an overreaction to the scoreboard in the Tampa Bay game and not the game on tape. And the funny thing is, like, if I hadn't gone back and watched that game, I definitely could have seen myself being on that train. But when you watched it back, it was just... Tampa was biting themselves. Vipers biting themselves. No? Okay, fine. Thought it was funny. Biting themselves instead of really New York doing anything defensively. So, I like Tampa. Tampa's probably a team, too, like DC, that I'm going to be pretty high on this week. All right, if anybody's got any questions on this, would you be fine stacking Tampa Bay and playing the defense? Yes. Yes, I would. Would you, if there's any other questions on this game, let me know. Austin Prohl at this price, I'm not chasing. I just think that was kind of a week one thing. I'm not going to freak out about it. Again, they had so many plays. They ran, what is that? They ran 64 plays. I'll make Prohl go prove it to me again. I kind of think it was pretty fluky. If I was actually going to play someone on there, I actually think Travion Williams is really sneaky. He got 5 targets out of the backfield. Seattle was the one team that actually threw to their backs. So I would go to... I know Kevin Farrell was the guy who did the best through the air, or through the ground. But I really liked 9 targets to their running backs. Seattle was actually the one team that kind of had their together on that. So, and if BJ starts, I would expect that to be pretty similar this week. Caveman, you told me to stay out. I haven't looked at what the contest is. You told me to stay out, I stayed out. If you're in the Fantasy Cruncher Discord and you happen to catch this on Thursday evening, Hop into the Discord, go to FC Contest. I'm not sure what they're doing, but I don't know if I really want to know what they're running. But apparently they're running a contest of some form. Okay, let us move on to Game 3. Dallas and LA. This is the game I think we know the least about this week. Both teams are starting different quarterbacks this week. Landry Jones and Josh Johnson are both expected to start. So this is a little bit tougher. We don't have a whole lot to go off of here. Because both teams started backup quarterbacks in week 1. I kind of am going to just default to my preseason thoughts on this team. For LA, I do think Nelson Spruce is going to be the guy. Now, do I think it's going to be 15 targets? No. But I do think he is going to be the guy. I still like Smallwood a lot. He got 6 targets. He's probably my second favorite receiver on that team. But I do think Nelson Spruce is the one. And kind of a situation where I was beating myself up. Should have known he was the one moving into the game. I think Elijah Hood just didn't really have a lot of room to run. The backup situation was bad. The quarterback, they just pounded the box. It's not going to be that way with Josh Johnson. There should be more running room. So I'm perfectly happy to get back on Elijah Hood a little bit here this week. Nothing crazy, but I do want to give a little bit of exposure to him. I think the running backs are going to be pretty close to just 1 max per team. And I think I'm going to be a little more overweight than that. I think that's a little too far given the price drops on these guys. So I'll probably have I'm just ballparking this. I haven't run a crunch. I'm going to guess like 150 to 160% of running back exposure across my team. Maybe that's a little high. Maybe it's closer to 120, 130. But I do want to get some running backs in there. I do think there's a little more ceiling than we saw in week 1. But Josh Johnson's going to be such an upgrade for this LA team. So I have confidence they'll be able to put up some points. Dallas under Landry Jones. I think I'm a little more concerned about Dallas than I am LA. I think that would be fair. The play calling just didn't look that great. It's funny, like, Phil Nelson went 33 for 42. And I have to be honest, it did not look like he went 33 for 42. Like, it was, average yards per attempt was 5 yards. Just not going to, like, the whole point of the air raid is to stretch the football deep, and they didn't do it. Jeff Badette was limited with that injury he sustained. He looks like he's fine. I haven't seen him on the injury report. Let me check that real quick. Yeah, he's not on the injury report, so I'm not too worried about it here. I think he'll end up playing, and hopefully they'll throw the football a little bit deeper. Cam Phillips, I'm sorry, that's the wrong team. Where did Dallas go? Nagel caught 6 balls. Parham caught 6 balls. Dunbar caught 6 balls for no yards. I mean, I think Dunbar's the running back you want to own for Dallas just because of that PPR upside. Do you think he's going to keep getting some dump down targets? But I'm not giving up on Jeff Badette yet after one bad week. 8,700. I'm going to go back there for sure. Parham looked okay, but for me it's really Dunbar and it's really Badette. I'm not going to freak out about it yet, about his lack of production. If they don't throw the football down this week, then maybe I'll have to start worrying about Jeff Badette's role moving forward. But I'm not gonna jump ship after one game. I think he'll take another dud for me to really consider the fact that maybe Dallas isn't going to throw the football as deep as I think they are. Yeah, I'm concerned that LA fired the defensive coordinator and got rid of their captain after 1 week. But I have to admit, ever since that report, there really hasn't been a whole lot more news about it. It looks like the team has rallied and kept their mouth shut. So I kind of expected that to turn into a little bit of just everyone would talk trash. It hasn't. So I think there's been some rallying to what's going on there. I mean, they didn't blitz at all. Like, they ran 0 blitzes versus PJ Walker, and that's just never going to work. We're going to talk about that when we get to the Houston game. PJ Walker, you got to blitz him, and they didn't even try. So I have some concerns, but again, I don't really know what either one of these teams are going to do. We didn't see either one of these teams in full strength in week 1. So to take huge stands like, oh, fade Dallas, fade LA, I'm not going to go there. Am I in love with any of these guys? No. But I'm not going to write any of these guys off. So I think they all have GPP merit to them. This is one of those situations going to kind of see what everyone else writes tomorrow and Saturday. There's not a whole lot of content out, which is good. I like being out first. No one can really say I'm stealing any takes. There are no takes out there to steal. than mine, I guess, after the show. So I'm in the camp that I would like to have some Elijah Hood. I'd like to have some Jordan Smallwood and some Jeff Badette, but it's not going to be massive quantities. If someone wants to make one of these guys chalk, fine, I'll be underweight on him. But I do kind of want to have some ownership on him. Okay, let's move on to the third game. I don't see any questions on this one. Do you like Jazz if he has a bigger role this week? Boy, Jazz misran a really bad route not looking for the football. He had a touchdown, and he didn't look back. I'm a little worried about Jazz. Jazz is kind of in the I need to see it camp. It was a big play. They were down 6 at the time, and it was open. And the quarterback made the right read, and he just never turned his head. Phil Nelson was livid at him. And the coaching staff wasn't much happier, and he went and sat on the end of the bench. He knew it. I have to see it from Jazz at this point. Because, I mean, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys get multiple targets. I don't think there's much in terms of clarity what they're going to do. All their running backs caught a pass, right? So Dunbar caught 6 balls. Young caught 4. Cameron Artis-Payne caught 4. And Walter caught 1. So, again, their running backs caught a ton of balls. What is that? That's 10, 14, 15 balls to their running backs of the 33 completions. So, again, that's not really what Dallas wants to be doing. They want to be throwing it down the football field a little more than that. So, I have a little confidence that they'll get it done, but I kind of need to see it. And Jazz just, I can't go back to Jazz. That was a really, really big mistake. All right, let's move on to the main event. It's on Sunday Night Football, and I think it's very appropriate that it's Sunday Night Football. It is St. Louis. It is Houston. I actually believe this game's at 8 p.m. It's got moved up. It is 6 p.m. Eastern. I could have sworn it was 8 p.m. So it's a 6 p.m. start on FS1. St. Louis at Houston. St. Louis, the only team in the XFL with a road win, goes to Houston. This spread is high. It's one of the spreads that I looked at, and it's not. Last week, Houston's much better than Dallas is, so St. Louis is getting some points. But this is a little too much respect for Houston. And I love Houston this week, and I think they're going to put up some points. But St. Louis is not going to run 0 blitzes at P.J. Walker. Like, that's just not going to happen. The St. Louis secondary held up pretty good against the air raid of Dallas. Like, they held a lot of balls underneath. P.J. Walker was able to get whatever he wanted down the football field in week 1. That's not going to happen in week 2. It's going to require a little more precision down the football field. I like P.J. Walker as the number 1 quarterback on the slate. I don't know. That's a tough ask for me. I get he's dual threat, but he really did only rush for 26 yards. Now, he didn't need to run for a lot of yards in the second half. I will acknowledge that, but I'm a little worried here as the most expensive quarterback on the slate. I think that's a little bit of a 1-week overreaction. And I think it's an underreaction on St. Louis's defense. Like, St. Louis really did everything possible to lose that football game. They committed, let me see if I can find the penalties here. Let's see if I can find it. I'm not sure they're going to have it. They committed a ton of penalties. It was like 7 or 8 penalties. They fumbled the football once. They turned the football over twice. And a couple of them were in like the red zone. They did everything they could to try and lose. And they still really held Dallas well. 4.5 yards per play over 59 plays. 1 for 10 on third down. They held the rushing game intact. The passing game went nowhere. They got 4 sacks. They committed 78 penalty yards. There it is. I can see it now. If St. Louis cleans it up, I don't think this Houston's going to just be able to march up and down the football field. Now, I think they'll get some points. Don't get me wrong. I still have interest in... I'm not saying fade Houston or anything. Like, I still am going to have some Sammy Coates. I'm going to have some Khalil Lewis. But you're paying basically top prices for 3 guys because they had 1 good week against a bad defense? Yeesh. That's a strong ask for me. You know, I like Cam Phillips, but 8 targets? I'm not sure he's going to get 8 again this week. Khalil Lewis, 6 targets, very efficient, but he only got 45 yards and a touchdown. Now we're paying $8,900 for him. He's a great player, but again, I'm not so sure about this. Now the thing that helps Houston is they only ran, 54 plays? I guess it is in the team button. I can stop trying to count the math. Ran 55 plays, so that's pretty lowish here. So that's definitely a benefit, but there's just a lot of options on this team. Phillips, Holly, Lewis, Mobley, Coates, Butler out of the backfield. I'm not ready to give up on it yet. What's the status on Henderson, too? Henderson, shoulder, did not participate. So it does look like that it'll be Butler again in the backfield. He's pretty cheap still, I think. $6,300, that's not bad for Butler if he gets the work. But I'm just worried. I think there's a lot of options for Houston, and paying premium prices for all of them definitely is going to make your team a little harder to build. Now, on the Battlehawks side, I love the Battlehawks again this week. I don't think their prices went up enough. Jordan Ta'amu, look, the St. Louis is going to run the football. They're going to be balanced. They ran the ball, what was that, 35? That's a lot of running pass. 34, 41 times, 42 times they ran the football, including 10 quarterback runs. I think that's probably going to be here to stay. I think they are going to try to run the football here against Houston, but I do think they're going to try to get some play action passing. They're going to need to get points on the board, and I think Ta'amu showed an ability to do really well in play action. He threw a couple really nice balls to Russell, threw a couple really nice balls to Lucas and Pearson L. The Pearson L price to me is too high at $8,000. I'll have some, but I would much rather take the Russell, Lucas, Washington tier. I think all those guys are way too cheap, especially Lucas. Lucas caught 6 balls. Cole Hunt broke his leg, so that he's going to have the tight end gig to himself. He's a former wide receiver. They're definitely using him in the passing game. I think that's for real. I think those targets are for real. So $4,600 from Marcus Lewis. That's one of the prices that stood out to me immediately when I saw the slate. Same with Alonzo Russell. I was on him last week. I really liked him last week. He was 1% owned. He'll be a little higher than that this week, but I still like him again at $4,800. I like St. Louis. I think that this is going to be a two-way game. And if Houston is able to put up a lot of points, then that means St. Louis is putting up points as well. So I do think that means that you're going to want to have some exposure to these St. Louis guys. Matt Jones, only $5,900. I think he definitely is the number one running back. To me, it's pretty clear Christine Michael is a gadget guy. I think they want Matt Jones to be the guy that he got the first carry. So $5,900 for the one team that actually likes to run the football, I think is a really good price. I know Keith Ford stole the touchdown, but Matt Jones got 21 carries. 21 carries in the XFL for $6K, I think is just a fantastic bargain. Nick Colley, don't forget about Nick Colley. He's the number 3 wide receiver. He's listed as a running back. I think he'll be really popular, but I do want to point out that they did not move his eligibility from running back over to wide receiver. But I love Matt Jones. I like Ta'amu. I love the pass catching here. And it's not that I hate the Houston options. I'm not saying that. I think I've been pretty pessimistic on Houston. I just think it's tough to justify the pricing on these guys. Like 3 elite receivers, that if you're going to play PJ Walker as your highest owned quarterback, you're going to have exposure to all of these. It's a very expensive stack to build. And there are some value plays, so you can do it. It just feels a little rich for my blood, just because of how bad the LA defense was, how they never blitzed. I'm worried that we're overreacting here a little bit. I love PJ Walker. I think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league, but this is just an overreaction. You think they throw more than just screens to Washington? I do. I mentioned this to you last week when you asked me this question about Washington, or maybe it was someone else. I think it was you, though, Joe. And I told you that he had the toughest matchup in the entire XFL at corner, and I think you saw that when they really just threw him only screens. So I'm definitely going to go back to LaDainian Washington. The matchup this week's a lot easier than the one last week, so I'm definitely going to go back to Washington here. So I just wanted to point that out. I do think it's a good matchup for Washington. Last week was a horrible matchup. This one's much better. So Washington, again, is another one of those guys in that tier for St. Louis that I really like. So just to recap, quarterbacks this week for me, And this is, I guess, subject to change, but I really don't think it's going to at this point. Top quarterbacks for me are Cardale Jones, Quentin Flowers if he starts, and Jordan Ta'amu. And I will have some Phillip Walker. I'm just going to be under the field on Phillip Walker, I'm pretty sure. Running back, Davion Smith, Presley, Matt Jones, and Nick Holley are probably the 4 I want to have the most exposure to. I don't hate getting exposure to those Seattle backs if you are playing a bunch of Tampa, because they did catch a bunch of balls out of the backfield, but I don't want to go super crazy on them because that was just one game, and maybe it was just the thing DC gave them. Wide receivers, the highest owned guys for me are going to be these 4K St. Louis guys, Russell, Lucas, and Washington. I love Dan Williams. I'm going to go back to there. He's not priced up like a stud. I'm not quite sure why. And then, of course, I'm going to have some exposure to McKay and Spruce and Rogers and Coates, but it's not going to be through the roof. There's so many of them. They're all priced up. I think the guy I probably end up with the most exposure to is Eli Rogers of the group. I think that's probably the one I end up with the highest exposure to. But I kind of just have to see how the teams play out once I plug in my projections and kind of go from there. Also, too, if you're watching this on Friday, Fantasy Crunchers will have projections again this week. We were just waiting on injury news before we uploaded them. So just an FYI, we will have projections. I know they're not showing here, but don't freak out. They're not going anywhere. We were waiting on injury reporting before we put them in there. Defense. The only one I feel really confident in is the Vipers. That's the one I feel the most confident in. You could make a case for the defenders. I could see that case. But I really like the Vipers. I think targeting Seattle is going to be something we do. And this might be the last chance we can get it as not chalk. So I think I'm going to take that opportunity to target the Vipers defense. I know it's a road defense, but I think that's the right way to go about it. So I like the Vipers and the defenders the most this week. Tompkins for DC didn't play last week. No, he did not. He definitely will matter. I'm just really concerned that he's going to actually play fully, if that makes sense. Like, I think they're going to work him in. Like, I don't think we're going to see a situation where they're just going to go ahead and bench the guys they had, right? So I don't think Eli Rogers is going to get benched. I don't think Rashad Ross is going to get benched. I don't think Dupree is going to get benched. So I think they're going to just work in all 4 of them, which also probably is a little bit of a red flag on Eli Rogers, 9,700. But I think he takes over the Simi Cobbs role as kind of like the 4th guy. That's kind of my thoughts. And he kind of rotates his way in. Tompkins is good, though. He's cheap, too, isn't he? I bet you he is free because he didn't do anything last week. 3,600. That is a nice price on Tompkins, but you just never really know that he's going to steal someone's starting job till you see it. So that's a little bit concerning, I think. Also, too, DC quietly ran the ball a ton, but again, they were in control in the second half, but only 26 pass attempts for Cardale Jones. That was pretty low. I think that's the second lowest in the league, only to Jordan. No, Ta'amu had 27, so it might have been the lowest in the entire league in week 1. But that was a good question. So, all right, I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll have an XFL primer up over on fantasycruncher.com tomorrow, which is just going to be a lot of this in word form. But check it out anyways. There's possibility that overnight research changes my mind on something, but I highly doubt it. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like to the video on YouTube. It really does help us out a ton. Get word out that we are doing XFL content. Again, if you are looking for a lineup builder, we have XFL at fantasycruncher.com. Feel free to check us out over there. We'll be back for week 3. Same time, Thursday afternoon, kind of do this XFL preview show. And of course, if you're a Fantasy Cruncher member, I'm in the Discord channel answering all of your XFL questions all the way up to lock. So feel free to check us out there. And with that, guys, we'll see you next week.